I have taken the floor of the United States Senate, and when I was a member of the House, the floor of the House, to talk about circumstances that are occurring somewhere in the world where people are being killed, displaced, people are being uprooted simply because of their ethnicity. Ethnic cleansing has occurred around the world, and I've taken the opportunity to put a spotlight on it in an effort to say that the civilized world needs to bring an end to that type of crimes against humanity. I've used the opportunity as a member of the Helsinki Commission and now as chairman of the Helsinki Commission to point out that our priority, America's priority, needs to be a leader in the world to prevent ethnic cleansing. Many of us believed after World War II that the world would never allow again to see circumstances where people were killed simply because of the ethnic community that they belonged to. I've talked about Bosnia, Rwanda, Darfur, Syria, and now, Mr. President, we see the same thing happening again in the South Sudan. I just came from a hearing of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that was convened on the crisis in the South Sudan. Two witnesses, the Honorable Linda Thomas Greenfield, the Assistant Secretary, Bureau of African Affairs, and the Honorable Nancy Lindberg, Assistant Administrator, Bureau of Democracy, Conflict, and Humanitarian Assistance, is giving an update to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee as to the circumstances in the South Sudan and what we can do to try to bring about a resolution. I rise today to discuss the deteriorating circumstances in the South Sudan. As some of my colleagues may know, ongoing political tensions between forces loyal to President Salva Kiir and forces loyal to the former Vice President Riek Machar, coupled with pre-existing ethnic tensions, erupted in violence the night of December 15th. I joined the President and Secretary Kerry in calling for an immediate end to the violence in the South Sudan. Currently, it's estimated that nearly 200,000 people have been internally displaced as a result of the conflict, with another 32,000 having fled to neighboring states. The UN estimates that thousands of Sudanese people have been killed since December 15th. Now, Mr. President, let me just remind my colleagues that 3 years ago today, the people of the South Sudan started a voting process that led to, later that year, their independence as the youngest new country in the world. Our U.S. Ambassador, Susan Page, has remained in Juba, along with a security detail and a minimum key personnel. I want to thank her. This is courage to be able to remain in the South Sudan so that we have our leadership on the ground to try to help the people. I applaud her bravery and sacrifice and those that are with her. The worsening violence has spurred a humanitarian crisis, and President nominated Ambassador Booth to be our ambassador to that region to try to get a peace process started. He's currently in Ethiopia trying to get the international community to respond to a political solution to the South Sudan. The international community has responded rapidly, including by working to significantly expand the size of the UN mission in the South Sudan. But since the evacuation of foreign aid workers, most humanitarian agencies and the international NGOs are heavily reliant on brave South Sudanese staff who put their lives at risk to help their people. There are so many, these are large numbers for the country of Sudan, the number of people displaced, the number of people being killed. Let me just share with my colleagues one of many examples of the crisis and how it's affected people in that region. I recently learned that on the onset of the December clashes, one local staff person from an American NGO was rounded up along with 7 members of his family and taken to a police station in Juba. He ultimately escaped to the UN compound, but his family was killed, along with more than 200 others. He is from the Nuer ethnic group, which now lives in fear of ethnic targeting by members of the country's security force from another ethnic group, the Dinkas. Media reports also suggest that individuals in uniforms have entered the UN bases in several locations and forcibly removed civilians taking shelter there. On December 21st, 2 UN peacekeepers were killed after a group attacked a UN peacekeeping base that was sheltering 20 civilians. There is no safe harbor today in the South Sudan. If the UN base can be overrun and people killed because of their ethnicity, the international community must respond. I remain extremely concerned at the reports out of the South Sudan, all of which suggest serious crimes against humanity are occurring in the country. The world cannot stand by and bear witness to another ethnic cleansing, as we saw in so many other places in the world. We must do all that we can to ensure a peaceful resolution of the crisis and accountability for war crimes and crimes against humanity in South Sudan. Mr. President, our first priority is to get peace on the ground, to stop the killings, so people can live in peace. We need to work with the international community so humanitarian aid can get to the people who need it. And that's very challenging, considering that NGOs, international NGOs, cannot operate today in the South Sudan. And we must hold accountable those who have committed crimes against humanity. We've said it over and over again. But unless we hold accountable those who have perpetrated these atrocities, we will see it again and again and again. The United States leadership is critically important to make sure that we document what has taken place and that we bring to justice those who are responsible for the crimes that have been committed. There's no question that the solution to the crisis in the South Sudan must be political, not military. We understand that. South Sudan, again, is at a crossroads, and after coming so far, it must choose to renounce violence immediately and pursue a path of peace and reconciliation. I am encouraged that President Kerr and former President Bashar have sent negotiators to Ethiopia to participate in mediation talks. And while these talks are a good first step, in the interim, the violence must end and both sides must be committed to negotiating in good faith. It is my hope that these talks can bring about a bright future so many South Sudanese aspire for. The people of the South Sudan deserve to understand the true meaning of safety and security, of peace and prosperity. The United States stands with the people of South Sudan through these difficult times. We must pledge to continue to support those who seek peace, democracy, human rights, and justice for all of the citizens of the world's newest nation.